You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Right, here we go. We've got a special show today. First of all, of course, I've got to welcome you all to episode number 131 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm so happy that you've chosen to listen in today because we had the very first interview with Suzanne Dixon, the President and CEO of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, on the ATC's big new initiative. I'm not going to spoil it for you, and I will leave it to Suzanne to talk about it herself. Trust me, though, if you love hiking and if you love the Appalachian Trail in particular, you're going to really get a lot from Suzanne in a few moments. As many of you know, I'm going to be heading out to the Appalachian Trail for my second, hopefully, through hike of the trail in less than 2 weeks. I booked my flight to Rana for February the 25th. I'm going to be staying with my very dear friend Anna Huthmaker of the Trail Dames and host of the Trail Dames podcast. That night, Anna and I will be having dinner somewhere in Georgia, and we are going to be joined by Robert Thomas, a listener, and his wife, Margaret. Robert reached out and wanted to come and wish me a good journey. He's going to drive about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. How nice is that? Then, the next morning, Anna has enlisted 2 of her Trail Dames friends to take me up to Springer via the Forest Road, and I'm going to be away. So, this show is the second from last podcast in this current format. Next week, I've got another excellent interview for you, but I will be saving that for then. After that, my aim is to podcast from the trail twice a week. Given the difficult logistics surrounding this project, I can't promise that each episode will be released like it was on the Camino, on a Monday and on a Thursday, though that is my aim. I've enlisted the help of Ryan Hopkins once more, and he'll be more a part of the show this time. Ryan and I met last week to iron out some details, but he's planning on getting on the trail himself and tracking down some of the Mighty Blue class of 2019 to follow their progress on the trail, particularly those who aren't hiking near me. It should be a lot of fun, and I hope that you're going to join us for it. And I should thank Ryan now anyway. He's been so helpful and so insightful, really, and I really value his input in the show. And given those logistical uncertainties, you should either make sure that you subscribe to the show on whatever your preferred podcast platform is, or you can like the Hiking Radio Network Facebook page, where I'll be posting certain updates as to where I am and what's going on. From time to time, I intend to tell people on the page where I'm going to be in, say, 3 or 4 days' time, and I'll be delighted to have a beer with listeners who want to come and say hi. Also today, I'm including my chat with Lisa Rana, who wrote to me about hiking the Grafton Loop Trail in 2 sections. I've heard about this trail many times and have always been interested in it, mainly because it includes the endless climb down, or up, depending upon which way you're going, from Old Speck. One of my most memorable tough days on the AT. Lisa will be here after Suzanne. Last, but very much not least, I'm finishing with the final chapters to conclude the book, The Year We Seized the Day, by Elizabeth Best and Colin Bowles. I know that parts of this have been tough sometimes to hear, but it's been a very vivid story and it finishes with some great moments. I'd like to publicly thank my darling niece Laura for reading Ellie's part and never missing a deadline, despite her growing pregnancy. It's been especially delightful for me to have hiked it with one niece and read it with another. Life is good. I sent Laura a dozen red roses for Valentine's Day to mark the end of going into her closet to record. She also has a rather embarrassing blooper of her own, and I'll be sharing that with you all, so stick around. So, with a big show ahead of us, let's hear from Suzanne Dixon. Here's Suzanne. Right, it's Valentine's Day today, so I thought it would be nice to give a bit of love to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So, I'd love to introduce Suzanne Dixon, the President and CEO of the ATC. Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
I'm great, Steve. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thank you. And you guys have got a new initiative called the Wild East. I've seen a very, very retro poster, which I loved, by the way, and a new website with a new, completely different look. Tell us about the Wild East.
Sure. So as I pass my first year anniversary, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy has rolled out Wild East, which is a far-reaching initiative we believe has potential to be the most prominent and really vital conservation campaign in the eastern United States. We've introduced the Wild East and the fact that the nearly 2,200-mile trail is the center of the last remaining contiguous open space east of the Mississippi. So we're
Yeah.
talking about the trail's attributes, of course, but weaving in the fact that the AT corridor is critical in protecting intact lands for the survival of wildlife species and in supporting thousands upon thousands of acres of forests, which are increasingly important in really stemming the impacts of climate change. And so this new initiative is really an opportunity to raise public awareness around the Appalachian Trail. Preserving that slender corridor is essential on so many levels on the future of the eastern United States. And
I'm sure actually. And on the poster, there was an associated article that went with it. And there's a picture of one of my favorite little bits of forest. And I had a picture myself of this. Is it Unaka Mountain? When you go through these tall spruces, it's just a magnificent sight to see, isn't it?
it is magnificent. And I think that's what the Appalachian Trail gives you. It gives you a different perspective depending on the state that you're in. And we really want to mobilize people to care about what's in their backyard.
Right. And the name Wild East, bet that took a long time to really play with that, because Wild West is an iconic name. You want an equally iconic name, I guess, as well. But I love the idea of the name Wild East. Tell us how that came about. What were you looking to do?
So we were looking at really the Wild West and thinking about all of the different attributes that the Wild West has. And when we looked at those attributes and characteristics of the iconic national parks that are out there, we realized that we have those attributes on the East Coast, and they haven't really been well promoted. And when you think about Benton Mackay, who really is credited with developing the whole concept for the Appalachian Trail in the 1920s.
Sure. Yeah.
He saw that Easterners travel to the West to visit national parks, but he also said that we have something just as spectacular in our own backyard. And so I've got some pretty great, creative, innovative staff on my team. And when we looked at really thinking and talking about landscape conservation from a very different perspective, we knew that it needed to be something visual, innovative, and creative that we wanted to build public awareness around. And so that's really how that really came about internally.
So when did you roll this out initially?
We rolled it out about 3 weeks ago.
And what has the response been?
Amazing. I would say it's been amazing. Everybody loves the poster, which obviously is a key takeaway, but they also see different attributes in it. They see wildlife, they see communities, they see the different ecosystems along the way. And it's been this really great opportunity for people to just kind of sit up and say, yes, the Appalachian Trail is one of the last remaining contiguous open spaces in the eastern United States. And you're going to hear me say that over and over again. And I think the opportunity for people to really sit up and hear that sense of urgency and ask themselves, how can they play a role in protecting and preserving the Appalachian Trail?
Yeah, well, interestingly, I saw a post that Laurie Pottiger did on Facebook some time ago about the corridor, the whole thing, because it isn't just that little 12-inch wide path, is it? The path, the corridor is quite extensive, isn't it? And that still needs looking after.
It is. It's more than a simple footpath, which is what we refer to it as. And in my almost over a 1-year tenure at ATC, I've seen that time and time again when we talk about the trail and its length of nearly 2,200 miles. Most people have no idea. And when you think about the terrain that the AT goes through, we start to pick up interest. So I don't know if most people know that the AT goes through 6 national parks, 7 national forests, 2 national wildlife refuges, 25 wilderness areas, several national recreation areas, and dozens of national heritage areas.
It feels a whole lot longer than that, I've got to tell you.
Right?
It really feels a whole lot longer than that.
When we talk about the inequity between large landscapes in the West and here in the East, that point is, I believe, key to making strides in our efforts to build support for protecting the Appalachian Trail and its surrounding lands.
Well, there's no question it is. And I read through that article that appeared with the poster, which was excellent, by the way. And it says, which I almost don't believe, by the way. I do believe it because it was there, and I presume it was research. It says that in the last decade, the US has lost 175,000 acres of forest each year to pavement. How is that possible? How's that been allowed to happen?
Yeah, that's a really great question because this is where we as citizens have opportunities to advocate for something that you care about.
Yeah,
And there are ways that we all can help in making sure that that does not continue to happen. But as urban sprawl happens, you think about Benton Mackay in the 1920s when he talked about needing a place to get away from for urban dwellers. In the
sure.
1920s, he was thinking about that. So what would he be thinking today, having heard that stat that you just threw out there? So
Yeah,
that's where I pivot to say that we as an organization and our members and our volunteers have to get out there and they have to join, they have to vote in our country. Elected officials make decisions every day that affect the things we care about. And you just talked about some of those. The volunteer aspect of that, showing up once a year or once a month, but walk the walk by physically pitching in and giving back and speaking out. That is a way that you can really help. And we can educate our members and our supporters about how you can really make a change around stopping that kind of development and stopping the loss of forests. But it's the reality that we live in today.
yeah. I must admit that was. I've always been one that when I see an issue, I need to have something I can bring wrap my brain around. I need a number like that. So that 175,000 acres, and that's each year to pavement. I just think it's incredible to me. And I know there are millions and millions of acres in the country, but you just can't afford to lose it that much. And what about other development on or near the trail? Are there currently any big issues ongoing that immediately concern you?
Yeah, I think about us as an organization addressing threats, and I think about the developing of sound policy. And we are, last year our policy team had significant influence on the development of new natural gas pipeline siting policy
Sure.
through bicameral, it's a bipartisan Pipeline Fairness and Transparency Act. We implemented a take action strategy to engage and activate trail supporters on high priority advocacy issues. So, like pipeline siting and other threats to AT resources, we launched a House AT caucus and are raising the ATC and the trails profile with Congress. But we're fighting energy development. We've got pipelines like the Mountain Valley Pipeline that has been around now for a couple of years that we are trying to address. But we also believe as an organization, we're not going to see the cease of industry and pipelines and power lines. And so how do we, as an organization, develop that kind of sound policy? So looking at policies that have been in place since the 1990s, there was a public comment period this past year in June of 2018 where we were able to call upon our clubs and our members and our volunteers to sign a letter asking FERC to look at the policies from the 1990s. Because a lot has changed, Steve, when you look at
Of course.
industry and policies
Sure.
in 1999 versus 2019 and 20 years. So how do we as an organization be that group that's at the table really helping industry cite where pipelines should go, and really make sure that we've got the right process and policies in place, because this is not going away in the next 10 years. It's going to continue to happen. So what
I'm
role
sure.
does ATC get to play there? And the other thing you asked about really was threats that we have too. And so there are multiple threats when you think about invasive species and forest pests, habitat loss, which you talked about, and climate change. That challenge is the integrity of the protected AT lands. And as your audience knows, when you're out there and what you see, it's hard for you to really understand that like an introduced exotic pest exists for nearly every native tree species found in the
Yes.
Appalachians. So
Yeah.
some, such as the emerald ash borer and the American chestnut blight, they've caused nearly complete extinction of their hosts. So
Yeah, I know.
invasive species are a landscape scale issue, a challenge far too large to tackle alone. And that's why we need Congress and our partners and our members to really come together to really look at protecting our resources.
Yeah, and this is a multi-generational thing. So this is not just Republican or Democrat. It is everybody, and changing governments over a period of time. What sort of responses do you get? Because I, we're all frustrated tree huggers, aren't we? Really, people with beards and things like that, and that sort of nonsense. And so I kind of wonder, what do the politicians make of a, let's say, more aggressive? No, maybe that's not the word, but a more assertive Appalachian Trail Conservancy. What are they? How are they responding to you?
Pretty great, because I think the trail is, as you mentioned, it's a bipartisan effort. And when you think about the trail and the backyards that it goes through, the businesses, the entrepreneurial opportunities, the quality of life that the trail brings to those communities where those members represent. And one thing that we've started, we launched the House AT Caucus, and we're raising the ATC's profile and the trail's profile with Congress through those regular meetings. But we're getting a really good response rate there, I think, and I'll continue to say it, I think the trail is a way to bring people on both sides of the aisle together.
Sure.
When you're out there on the trail and you hike 10 miles or you section hike or you through hike and you stop in one of those communities and you realize that your dollars are giving back to those communities. And for us as an organization, it's really leveraging for the positive the bed and breakfast that you're staying at that night, and the opportunity for them to play a role in protecting. And so for them to speak out, if something's on their mind, good or bad, share it along with an action that will help things improve. And so it's been really great, I have to say.
Good.
An exciting time ahead, I think, in 2019 too, as we move forward, especially with this campaign, Steve. One of the reasons for doing this was to really raise the profile.
Sure.
With the 55% of the U.S. population that lives within a day's drive. I joke, I don't want them all on the AT, but I do need them to volunteer. I do need them to be an advocate or just get out there. Like, I want the people and the families that want to go for 5 miles and bring a picnic just as much as we want through hikers and section hikers. So making the trail really accessible, but at the same time, educating people about the challenges and the threats that we face as an organization to really protect that amazing resource.
Yeah, well, I just on the last point of the politicians, I have a horrible feeling that in general politicians tend to patronize us and various interest groups and so on. I hope that there's a real engagement by them. I mean, are there actually any hikers in government or not? That'd be interesting if there were a couple of really good ones.
I have to tell you that the co-chairs of the Appalachian Trail Caucus, one is Congressman Don Beyer, and if I get this right, I think he has about 250 miles to go before he completes the entire Appalachian Trail.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
And then Congressman Phil Rowe is actually a doctor, and he gets out on the trail because he thinks it's a way to be more healthy and all about wellness. So we've got really two great co-chairs who have a real big interest in their personal lives of getting on the AT, but they realize the benefits of how that trail can give back to their community. So I'm happy to say yes is the answer to that question right now.
Yeah, well, I tell you, it is a worry to me always. The government is always more difficult to, there's literally sorting the wood through seeing the wood through the trees, ironically. And this trees thing, I recently listened to the audio version of Bill Bryson's book, Walk in the Woods. My favourite book about the AT, the worst film about the AT, or worst film ever. It was the book that inspired me and many others to get on the trail, but it's also a book that really divides hikers, in their opinions. And Bryson at the time was writing about 96 or 97, something like that, and he was predicting the loss of virtually all the trees on a timescale that's occurring right now. So whatever steps have been taken by the ATC over the last 20 odd years, in conjunction with government, seems to have helped and saved and regenerate some of those forests, because he was talking then about the American chestnut. You say they haven't been entirely wiped out, or they are entirely wiped out now?
So the American chestnut blight, they've caused near complete extinction of their hosts. So what ATC has done is we have inventoried over 3/4 of the trail to identify areas of greatest invasive concern. So our resource management work has been focused really on implementing projects to curtail the spread of the emerald ash borer, which is an invasive forest pest that is decimating populations of ash trees. But we're addressing habitat loss. We have focused on expanding habitat for the golden-winged warbler and pollinators such as monarch butterflies and bees.
Sure.
But it really comes down to a resources thing too, and I'm talking about dollars in this case. Being able to get out there and assess the damage that's been done. I mean, I never talked about something called hazard trees before coming to ATC, but really looking at trees that have dead limbs that really need to be taken care of or removed. So those are some issues that we as an organization have been really at the forefront of, and we don't do this by ourselves. We do this in partnership with the National Park Service. But if we had additional dollars, we could make a much more bigger impact around addressing that habitat loss.
And where do you fit in then with the National Park Service then? Do you take the lead specifically on AT matters, or how does that all work out?
So it's a cooperative management agreement with the National Park Service. And so we have the role of managing and maintaining the Appalachian Trail. And then we'll do joint efforts like scenic resources is another opportunity for us to really map those views and those scenic resources. So if there is a threat down the road, we can say, this is not the best place to put a pipeline due to the mapping that we've just done around scenic resources, which I think is an opportunity to really be a transformational exercise that we would go through. The Park Service takes the lead on becoming a national historic designation. So there's different roles that we play, but ours is really the maintaining of the trail, which this past year has been incredibly more difficult because of wildfires. We've also had a lot of rain and some floods. And those are things that take, trees down. And so there's more blowdowns, and our volunteers who are amazing. If I can just give a shout out to our 31 clubs who volunteer over 250,000 volunteer hours each year, which is about 6,000 volunteers, saving our federal government about $6 million. So it's a big, big give back that they give, but each year becomes more challenging when you have the Forest Service, for example, who's had to eat into their budget to deal with the massive increase in wildfires. That's their general operating budget that they've had to delve into. So there's opportunities like that with Congress saying, hey, let's give the Forest Service a pot of money that allows them to fight fires and not take it out of their general budget. So those are other issues that we also wrestle with.
Sure. I'd like to kind of return a bit now to the Wild East thing. Are you positioning the AT in contrast to Western national parks?
We are. I think that we've spent probably the last 30 years, everybody talks about the Wild West and the Western parks. And I believe, having come in here to ATC and having worked in conservation of public lands, I didn't really hear a lot of drumbeat about the Appalachian Trail. So I think if we do this right, Steve, and we mobilize the general public, this has the opportunity to be one of the biggest campaigns to hit the East Coast in the last 25 years. So we are doing that a little bit. We need to. We need to wave that flag and say, hey, check out the Appalachian Trail. Given all of the different attributes that it has and the different ecosystem that it has, the different threats that you and I have just talked through here, we really need people to be more aware of why we need to protect and preserve while also managing the AT.
So in many ways, and this is a bit of a double-edged sword, I think, this is about getting more people on the trail and more aware of the trail, isn't it?
It is. It is an opportunity for me, an education piece. As I go out there and I talk to individuals or communities, there is this understanding that the Appalachian Trail is this simple footpath, but we have to think beyond that simple footpath. We have to think about the fact that there are threats, and I'm going to keep saying that, Steve, threats and challenges, and we need people to really learn about how they can take a role in protecting the AT. But there's a happy medium here because we struggle with visitor use, but we also have an opportunity to educate people to talk about accessible trails alongside the AT. We also have the opportunity to really protect that hiker experience. So as the ATC's core is our goal to ensure that all hikers and visitors understand how to enjoy the trail safety and ethically enjoy that trail safety, we also do things like leave no trace. We shake people's backpacks down. We have ridge runners that are on the trail, which you and your listeners are very familiar with, but the incredible role that they play as ridge runners and the territory that they cover, most of them cover 40 to 50 miles, but shaking down your backpack, teaching you about how to hike and the best practices to do that. So while we're raising the profile of the AT, we hope that more people will pick up the phone, and reach out to their member of Congress. Also maybe contact a club and become a volunteer and or become a member of the Appalachian Trail. I think that there's a way to do both, educate and not really overwhelm the trail where those hotspots are, but really drive our listeners and our readers to other parts of the trail that do not experience what McAfee Knob experiences on a weekend with a couple of hundred people showing up. So that's sort of the goal too, is to do it a different way. Like these are other places that you can access on the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, I'm sure, but it definitely is a double-edged sword. So it's difficult to control the effectiveness. If you're very effective in this campaign, and people think, oh my God, this is great, I've got to get there. We go up from 3 or 4 million to 5 or 7 million or something like that, on the trail, and that would be overwhelming. So how do you maintain the trail and encourage conservation at the same time?
So one of the things that we've done recently is something called AT Camp, which is a step in the right direction. So it's for thru hikers and camping. It's a registration system for the trail. So thru hikers have started to play a major role in helping even out the flow of hikers to better seek the fellowship with the wilderness for which the AT is famous. So the ATC's AT Camp, which is atcamp.org, it's an online voluntary registration system for all AT campers and thru hikers, which opened in 2017. So that is one way that we can really sort of assess how many people are coming from that perspective. And I will tell you, in 2017, over 80% of the 2017 thru hikers used it. I'm going to say that's a good rate of return there. The other thing is
That's an amazing rate of return.
I think it's an amazing rate of return too.
And
so I think currently there are 3 registration types. So there's groups, there's section hikers, and thru hikers. So that AT Camp allows AT hikers overall to be part of that crowding solution. It provides a tool that allows them to see the number of other campers registered for a site to avoid crowded campsites and the damage that results. So voluntary registration enables hikers to enhance their AT experience and enables us to better manage the AT without additional regulations. And it also encourages, I think, hikers to learn and follow leave no trace ethics to better protect the trail that they love. So that's one really great opportunity for us to help manage the Appalachian Trail. And then the other, which we're starting to do, are put in some trail counters and really get a better understanding of the numbers of hikers that are going through particular spots along the trail. So those are 2 really simple solutions that I think is a step in the right direction.
How many thru hikers do you think are going this year, as far as you know?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say we had almost 4,000 in 2018. I don't know the numbers for 2019 yet.
And the reason I asked that, to try to get some context, while I know thru hikers anecdotally are a bad bunch, or a number of them are a bad bunch, and standards are dropped. I never saw that when I was out there at all, and it concerns me a little bit about some of the so-called bad stories, because there are only say there are 4,000 of them, say there are 5,000 of them, 5,000 out of about 3 million. That's a really, really tiny percentage of people who are thru hiking the trail. So I know that, as I say, Facebook is the worst thing for this, and I've talked about this on the show before, how Facebook slags all thru hikers, and I find that very sad. So for those of us who are heading out there this year, what are, 3 things that you would most like them to consider when they're on the trail this year?
That was a really great question. I'm going to say 1, register on our AT Camp. 2, practice leave no trace ethics. And then number 3, enjoy, have fun, disconnect.
Nice. And in fact, in many ways, Suzanne, the disconnecting thing is interesting as well. I one of the things I have heard recently, people have these large boom boxes, or not large, but these Wi-Fi these things you can have a speaker which plays loud music. Put headphones in, for God's sake. Not everybody wants to hear your music. And they certainly won't want to hear. They certainly won't want to hear mine, I tell you. So I might start taking them on if they do that. But yeah, so those 3 things: leave no trace, register, which I know I've got to do myself, but I've only just decided when I'm going, so I'll register as well. Leave no trace and enjoy. Yes, absolutely right. They should definitely enjoy it. Now, you mentioned earlier that you want to support the communities that are close on the trail and close to the trail rather. And this is something that you've spoken about before. In fact, you spoke about it last year when we interviewed you for the RTK show. You're actually the first person to be on both shows. What form does that take? And have you had any progress with those trail towns?
Yes, I'm happy to say a year later, we have launched a pilot program around our AT communities, really trying to understand and leverage the economic benefits of the trail and then outdoor recreation as a result of that. And so we're looking at, and I like to say we're doing these boring visitor data surveys, but they're incredibly important to really understand who's coming, how long are they staying, and what kind of dollars are they spending in their community. So at the moment, we're doing trail user visitor surveys, really looking at business owners and doing interviews and surveys with them, and then looking at literature review and economic profiles of a range of values. But the other thing that we've sort of put a bigger umbrella over this economic piece is geotourism, which is a community-driven program. So identifying, developing, and protecting nature, heritage, cultural outdoor recreation assets, developing and marketing those travel experiences based on the synergy of these elements and the unique character of a place.
Whoa. We don't get words like synergy on this show. Come on.
Well, we're going to have some good synergy.
You sounded like you were reading about that.
No, because that's what it is. That is exactly what it is. I am all about the synergy of connecting volunteers and hikers and communities. How do we leverage each other for the positive? And I encourage you, Steve, on your through hike, to be thinking about what is the synergy of those elements and the unique character of a place. When you come off the trail and you go into a community, I want you to think about what is that, and I use this term, what's the trail identity shed? Is it that community that you're just in, or is it that community that's not an AT designated community, but the town that's 10, 15, 20 miles away? I'm all about collaboration. I think if we can collaborate, that we're going to be able to. I
did think about that. And there were several towns I saw going through where hikers were clearly not welcome. And that was sad to me, that they clearly weren't welcome. And I think getting that relationship right would be a really good thing, because you just talked about getting a questionnaire or getting information and data and so on. I'd love to know what the town's attitude is to the hikers who go in there. Did you find out any of that?
I think, yes, we are. I think there's an education process. I think so many towns are welcoming hikers. And then that's part of this geotourism program and economic development, is saying that hikers can give back. They do have dollars. Yes, they're going to look scruffy because they've been on the trail for 3 months. They're going to have, long beards and long hair, and it's okay. And so that's part of the education process and leveraging each other for the positive. The communities have this amazing trail in their backyard that hikers are coming through. They're spending the night. They're staying in a hostel. Some have communities where they can pitch tents. Yeah. But you want to eat. We're doing this in Pauling, Dover, New York, and there are different gaps in different places. Pauling, Dover, New York, their gap analysis is infrastructure around lodging and transportation. But when you go further down the trail to Kittatinny Ridge and Delaware River Gap, you've got community there that is very, very welcoming to through hikers. And
yes,
breakfast specials, and they open their doors for you. And so the opportunity to really do this education from Maine to Georgia is what part of this process is. Yes, it's a destination for those that want to come in and hike 20 miles, but it's also an opportunity to educate these communities about you and your listeners and our members and supporters who are going to go and through hike in 2019, that they are good people. They're going to spend their dollars in these communities when they come off the trail. But yeah, it's an education process, Steve. And as you said earlier, it just takes one person to change the narrative on that story. And I think that that's the story that we have to hit off at the end of the road.
I agree with you entirely. In fact, I've just returned from Spain. I did the Camino de Santiago in Spain, about 500 miles.
Oh, I love it.
And you go through a town, and in Spain, normally in the villages, they have a cafe, and you have Menu del Dia, which is menu of the day. They had Menu Pellegrino, which is pilgrim's menu, a specific menu for pilgrims. It might well be that one or two of these towns might get a good trick by giving a hiker's breakfast, as you say. Like some of them do, but some really don't. And it will be interesting to see if they embrace it in much the same way the Spanish embraced the Camino. There's obviously the sectarian element involved in that, but I think certainly in America, helping pilgrims go up a trail, I think it's a pretty nice Christian idea. So you never know, they might be able to introduce some sort of we could all become pilgrims, and I think if you
why not?
redefine ourselves,
Steve.
Exactly. There you go. I'm working with you here.
Okay, so here's the thing. So when we've done these initial site surveys and these site visits, these are some of the common concerns. There's a low local awareness of the AT and that outdoor recreation natural assets. There's a lack of knowledge of the trail users.
Sure.
So by the work that we're doing in these communities, we can help elevate and educate the trail users and who's coming and who wants to come and what these communities need to provide in order to leverage. I will tell you that one of the most exciting things that's come out of these site visits is the connection around farm to trail and the amount of farmers that are first generation or fourth or fifth generation that want to give back. They want to be able to provide a roof over a hiker's head, provide a really good meal, and you give back by volunteering on their farm.
Nice.
The same with some of these new hike and bike shops. They want to be give an opportunity to provide a place for your resupply. They want to provide shuttles for you to come into those communities. So I'm happy to say that a lot of what your listeners and you hopefully will get to experience in 2019 is people thinking differently in these communities about how they can really help you as you're helping them go through their community. So
yeah,
I'm excited about it.
So am I, and I hope it starts this very year.
It's going to start. It's already started, Steve. They're waiting for your arrival.
So doubtless we will talk again in the future. But say we talked again in 3 years' time. What would you expect to be talking about with regard to the health of the trail? What do you want to be talking about then?
Wow, that is a big, big question. I want to be talking about addressing threats and some opportunities that we've been able to work with Congress on. In 2019, I would love for us as an organization to have developed some sound policy. I also would like to have engaged more people. Yes, under the age of 40, but also over the age of 40, and really protecting the hiker experience, talking about what are those different trail stories. So moving forward, I think our successes are really going to be due to the efforts of my staff, dedicated volunteer corps, and the generosity of our membership and donors. And so for me, there's so much that we must do, and we'll continue to expand our current base and bringing in new partners. But if we can start to really raise the awareness with this campaign, bring more people under the tent, because I always ask myself who's not in the room, and there's always somebody who's not in the room. But if we can really start to drum, and that drum louder and louder and louder around the resources and the opportunity that the AT gives to everybody in their community, that I'll be feeling really good about what ATC has done around Wild East in 2019.
Okay. Well, look, I just say to Suzanne, if there's any question I ask that she doesn't like, she could get rid of it. And I'm going to ask one of those questions now. It's my last question to you. Okay. You and I have a mutual friend, Bruce. We were chatting the other day, and there are a couple of very, very well-known videographers on the trail. I won't name them. It's pretty obvious, reasonably obvious who they are. They've got YouTube channels with about 150,000 subscribers. And I know the ATC have got a YouTube channel. You've got about 2,000 subscribers. And I wonder whether some form of push on Leave No Trace films and stuff that really, really works and resonates with an audience might be really, really helpful for the ATC. And I wonder if you've considered that as an organisation. Remember, I'll take it. I'll take this out if you don't want it there.
No, leave it in, because I feel strongly that we should be there as an organization. Okay. And I think we've accomplished a lot in 2018, but I think that is a big piece of 2019. We believe that we are an organization that should be at the 150,000 views on YouTube, because people contact us about how to hike,
of course,
where to hike. I mean, Lori Pottinger, you've mentioned Lori Pottinger. I mean, she's the grande dame of the trail. She has amazing resources. I also think there's a lot of misinformation out there on some of these YouTube videos. And I think that we would love to work with those that are doing those videos and complement each other as we move forward in 2019. But Steve, yes, I'm hoping when you talk to me in a year, you're going to tell me that our viewership has gone up from 2,000 to 150,000. That is a serious stretch goal.
That is a really
we're up
push,
for the challenge at
push.
ATC.
Good stuff. Well, look, lastly then, so how can people get involved in ATC and the Wild East?
They can join as a member of our organization. And at the moment, we have, for a limited time, we're offering the incredible Wild East poster for a membership donation of $100 or more. The poster was designed by a guy named Tyler Nordgren. If you're familiar with him, he's done a lot of national park posters. He's an astronomer, an author, and an artist. But I would say, please join an organization. I said this earlier, vote. Make sure that your views are represented by voting for the person and policies that reflect your personal views. Volunteer, show up, volunteer, give back, just get out there and help. Really, the last thing I would say is have fun. Don't forget to get outside and enjoy the places you're advocating for. I think you'll come back. I know I do. I come back refreshed, inspired, and ready to take action. So those are some things that I hope people think about doing in 2019 to help ATC and our new initiative get off the ground here and protect and preserve. I'm going to say it one last time, Steve, one of the last remaining contiguous open spaces in the eastern United States.
Don't remind me, I'm doing it this year.
Good.
Well, look,
we'll be following you.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you, Suzanne. And I for one, I'm delighted I've had the opportunity to meet you in person as well. I think you do great things, and I think your team does great things. And I love the heck out of Laurie as well, like everybody does as well. So
that's right.
So we really appreciate all the work you guys do, and thanks for talking to us today.
Thank you so much.
Cheers then. Bye.
Bye.
Isn't she a terrific speaker and a very articulate advocate for the ATC? She's also a very natural speaker in person, and I really value everything that she and her team do for us. And yes, while I hadn't registered my hike, mainly because I hadn't finalised my start date until recently, I have now. And in case you were wondering, there were 0 questions that she wanted taken out, and I hope that we got a lot from our conversation. I certainly did. If any of you have questions about the Wild East Initiative, please reach out to the ATC, and those questions will be answered. This is a serious organisation, and Suzanne, despite her charm, or maybe because of it, is a serious person in this role. We should all be so grateful to her and to the ATC. Now I want you to listen to Lisa Rana and her view of the Grafton Loop Trail. Here's Lisa. Right, I'd like to introduce you to a listener, Lisa Rana. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. We've had some technical difficulties to try to record this, but we're here now, so let's make the most of it. And you wrote to me some time ago, and we started a little correspondence about Grafton Loop Trail. And I know it's such a spectacular area. Are you actually an experienced hiker, Lisa?
Actually, I am not an experienced hiker, which was one of the things that was very challenging in trying to tackle this Grafton Loop Trail, because it's probably, it's probably one of the more challenging sections. It was doable, but it was challenging for me, at least.
How close are you to the mountains?
Well, I actually live on Eastern Long Island, but my family has a home up in Casco, Maine. Nice. So we're about an hour from the Newry, Sunday River area.
So when you heard about, do you do any hiking or do you do day hikes? What's your general tendency?
I mostly do day hikes in my local area, but when I was in college, I did a few backpacking trips in Europe. I was over in Europe for a semester abroad when I was in college. And then I would say in like 2011, I did a couple of backpacking trips with my husband. I did one of them and a few by myself up in New England and in Pennsylvania. And I really, really enjoyed it. I love the outdoors. Yeah, when I lived in New York City, often I would get up at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, pile my dogs into my car and head out to Pennsylvania just to, do some day hiking just to get out of the city. So
nice.
I've always liked to be outside.
So you actually completed the loop this year. Did you do it in sections or did you do it in one go?
I had to do it in sections.
Okay.
There's no way.
I would think, yeah, for having no trail legs as well. So
Yeah.
it's actually not a long hike, is it?
It's about a 39-mile loop.
Yeah.
And, you can do it as one loop. And there are many, many people that do. I mean, I've seen some videos of people who have done the whole loop. But one of the nice things about it is if you want to do it in 2 different sections, you can do that as well.
How's that work then? So you go on and do, say, 10 miles or 15 miles, and then there's an exit, and so does the loop go half? I mean, how does that work? I mean, you get off halfway around?
Well, the loop is, again, it's bisected by Route 26. So
Right.
the western side of the loop is about 17 and a half miles, and the eastern side of the loop is about 21 miles.
Okay, so now I can't remember the area, but the name, I know that Old Speck.
Yes.
It connects to the 80 at Old Speck, and I do remember that, especially the downhill.
Oh my
Old
gosh.
Speck. It is endless, isn't it? Do you go up it or down it? The way you went?
I ended up going down Old Speck, which honestly, I don't know if it's worse going up or down. It's very, very steep and challenging. And it's about 3 miles. So it doesn't really give you any relief until the very end.
Seems like 10, doesn't it?
Oh my God.
I can remember it on my trip. It was one of the memorable downhills for me. It just went on and on and on. I mean, we were actually being met by somebody, and he promised to take us to China for Chinese food. So we were all up for it, and we thought, oh, we're just at the bottom of this hill. Oh my God, it went on and on.
And the thing is that some people go down it, and then they end up going up the other side to either the shelter at East Baldpate lead-to, or even up all the way to I can't even imagine doing that. That's crazy. But if you have your trail legs and you're an experienced hiker, I guess you just breeze right through it. Not me.
Well, yeah, certainly. I had my hiking legs by then, but I certainly didn't breeze through it. So how much of it does it share with the AT then? How much of the loop is shared with the AT?
I don't know the exact miles, but it merges with the AT at Old Speck, and then you go down Old Speck, you intersect with Route 26, and then it crosses Route 26, and you go up to West Baldpate and East Baldpate, and then at the top of East Baldpate, it goes off into the Grafton Loop again.
Right,
So
it goes off. Right.
I think it's about 3 miles down to 26 from the top of Old Speck, and about 4.5 miles up to East Baldpate. So I guess maybe like 7, 8, 9 miles, somewhere in like that.
So how did you do the sections? How many sections how many times did you go there to do it?
I did it twice. I did the first section, which was the west side. I started on the southern part of the trail, and I went to the north. And so that was what I did in June. And then I did the second section starting at the north part of the trail on Route 26, where the AT is. And then I worked my way south on the east part of the trail.
How long did it take you to do the 2 sections?
So the west part of the trail, the one I did in June, I did it in 1 overnight. And originally I was planning on doing it in 2 overnights, but I ended up just doing it in 1. And on the east side of the trail, I did it in 2 overnights. So 3 days and 2 overnights.
Nice.
I needed that for the east side of the trail. It was pretty strenuous.
Yeah, I'm sure. So did you, and I don't know what it's like off the AT, because all I've done is the AT. So once you get off the AT, are there shelters or do you just camp in a tent?
They have designated campsites that you must use. You're not supposed to do any camping outside of the campsites, and you're not allowed to have fires, although I did see evidence of fire rings at some of the campsites. Technically, you're not supposed to have fires.
Right.
The west side of the Grafton Loop has 4 designated campsites that you can use. And they're nicely spaced apart. So if you get to one campsite and it's too early, you want to move on to the next, you certainly can do that.
Yeah.
And you have some options there. All the campsites were really, really nice, I have to say.
Weren't any privies, were there?
They were. There were privies.
Lucky are you.
And on the It always makes it easier. And on the western side, they also had beer boxes so that you didn't have to hang a beer bag, which is really nice.
And the campsites are obvious, are they? They're on the just on the trail, so you can see them straight away
Yep.
with the tenting platforms and things like that.
Yes, and the campsites themselves are well marked. The Grafton Loop part of the trail, I have to say, there were a few sections that were not well marked, and I'm very glad that I had my gut hooks because I used it to get myself back on track.
Oh, really?
I was able to detect when I was off trail pretty quickly, but I mean, there were sections where there were no markers at all, and there was, I mean, to this day, I still don't know quite how I found my way, but I did manage to do it.
Oh, dear me. So tell us about the experience. Was it quite quiet when you went, or were you with anybody?
I went by myself on the first one, the one I did in June, which was the west side. And, it was a really, really nice experience. I honestly, on that one, which is in the beginning of June, I saw one person the first day coming down
Right.
From the campsite,
Sure.
and one person the second day. Also, we just were passing in opposite directions. And other than that, until I got my descent into Old Spec, I didn't see anybody.
Wow.
So I really don't think it's a widely used trail. And from what I read about the Grafton Loop, they created it so that people would have another loop in this area to do and kind of relieve some of the pressure from the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, right. Interesting.
So it's a new trail. I mean, relatively new. They finished one side of it in 2003 and the other side of it in 2007. So I think it's going to start to get more popular.
Is it reasonable to say then that you're not a nervous hiker? Because as you're not an experienced hiker and yet you're happy to stay overnight somewhere by yourself, were you quite comfortable with that?
I guess I'm not a nervous. Maybe I'm a stupid hiker. I don't know. I've never had a problem being by myself.
Right.
I don't have a fear of, being mauled by a bear or anything like that. I mean, it's a little disconcerting the first couple of times, but honestly, by the end of the night, you're so exhausted. You just want to set up your camp and have your dinner and relax. I always bring a Kindle with me and, you just go to sleep.
Yes, it's funny actually. People have asked me about why I'm going again and what I'm doing. Going on the AT again this year, and they said, "What's it like out there?" I said, "It's kind of strange. I couldn't imagine before I did this being in the middle of the woods as the sun's going down by myself with a tent set up, and I'm just going into the tent. I just couldn't imagine it before I went. But now I'm going to go for the second time." I can totally imagine it, and it doesn't bother me in the least. And yet the person I was talking to said, "That is just crazy. Why would you put yourself in that danger?" I presume that you didn't see any wildlife, or was you experience any wildlife in the middle of the night at all?
I didn't experience any. I mean, I heard a lot of birds and stuff like that, but I didn't hear anything. The second time I went, which was in August, I brought my dog Leo, and that was a different experience in and of itself.
I'm sure. I'm not a great dog lover myself, but for those who are and would love to take their dogs, I would think that's a lovely experience. Just doing a relatively short hike, a couple of nights by yourself with your dog. That must be nice. Well, are there any exits though once you're on the loop, or is Route 26 just the only divided place to get on and off?
Honestly, that's about it. And I will say, that was the most concerning thing to me, being by myself.
Yes.
In June when I did that first half, because it's a very challenging trail.
Right.
I mean, there are some sections that are just lovely and flat, and there are some sections that are straight up. They're like ladders and rebar rings and rock scrambles. I mean, you could barely, when you see what the trail looks like, you can't even believe that that's actually a trail. But that's the trail. And you're going up it because you have no other choice.
Yeah, that's one of the things about hiking is you have so little choice, don't you?
Yeah.
That's a trail. That's the one you're going on, so get on with it, sort of thing.
Yeah, but I mean, that was probably my biggest concern is, my God, what would happen if I slipped and fell or seriously hurt myself?
Sure.
And it was so much of a concern that when I went for my second hike in August, I actually did get a Garmin InReach, a mini one, so that I just had the ability to like text my family and let them know I was okay, and have that like little bit of peace of mind that if something seriously were to happen, I would be able to get some kind of help. Because this is not a trail where there were like little dirt roads or anything where somebody might, come by.
That's what I was wondering, yeah. So has this whetted your appetite to do a longer hike, or is that not in your immediate future?
No, I always would love to do a longer hike. It's not in my immediate future. I'm still working. I love my job. I'm going to be one of those people that if they do any kind of a long distance hike, it's going to be after I retire.
Right.
Yeah. Me and Bruce Mattson. It'll be similar to that.
Yeah. All those years waiting for it. Yeah. Yeah. So would you do this one again? Would you recommend it to people as a really good test?
I would recommend it to people. I think it's a really good place to like check out your gear. There are several very, very steep, challenging parts of it.
Yeah.
But there's also some relief. There's some parts that you can really get a lot of relief. There's plenty of water on this trail. You never have to worry about things like that.
Yeah.
I would, again, just for me, I like to have the InReach just as a little bit of a backup because it is not a widely used trail. You can't assume that somebody's going to be coming along.
Do you happen to know who maintains it? Is it the AT maintainers, or is it specific Grafton Loop maintainers club?
From what I read someplace, and don't quote me exactly, but I believe the Appalachian Trail Club maintains the western half. You
realize by saying don't quote me on something and then speaking on a podcast, you are being quoted.
That's true too. There are a lot of different the Appalachian Mountain Club and the main Appalachian Club, I know, do the maintenance. I believe one of them maintains the western and one of them maintains the eastern, or they could maintain all of it. But those are the two main clubs that maintain the Grafton Loop.
Great.
There were some blowdowns and stuff, but I have to say, as far as the trail itself, it was pretty well maintained. It could use a few more markings, especially in the lower part of the western part of the trail.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, look, thanks for coming on and talking about it. It's one I'd heard of a few times. A number of people said they'd done it. And I know that, listeners here are always looking for new trails to try. So that might be a really nice shakedown place. A tough one, but a nice shakedown hike getting ready for the AT. If
you are an experienced hiker, you could do it as a loop. Absolutely. There are a lot of people that do it. It'd be probably a good 5-day hike.
Nice. Very nice too. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on.
All right.
And if you do another one, let me know and we'll talk about that one. All right.
Good luck with you and in your upcoming hike, Steve. We'll be following you along. I'm looking forward.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Cheers, then.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. That sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? The climb down from Old Spec. Man, this year's class of hikers are going to remember that for a long time. God knows how the Soboers cope with going up it. My preparation has moved on apace. Do you remember that I told you last week about going to see Z-Packs and getting fitted for a backpack? Well, I got back home and ordered the backpack and the Z-Packs duplex straight away. Plenty of people say that it takes a while for stuff to get to you once it's ordered. I ordered it on Thursday, and guess what? They both turned up on Saturday. So now I'm off for a quick shakedown hike on the Florida Trail, and I'll be able to use all my gear before getting on the AT. It's coming together and I'll be ready to go for the 26th. Last, we had the final chapters of The Year We Seize the Day. I don't want to interrupt the flow like I did with the blooper from Laura a few weeks ago, but listen to this, as the word she means to say is tourists.
On top of the countless terrorists. Wow, that's... Please edit that bit. God. Not what I meant to say, obviously. Edit. I'll make it really loud. Edit. Sorry. Okay.
Classic. I cracked up when I heard that. She is such a sweetheart and wouldn't want to offend anybody. I loved it, and I told her that I was actually going to leave it in. I thought you'd like that. Anyway, these are the last few chapters and last book reading until I get back from the AT. I'll see you all next week. Chapter 35, Day 34, Santiago.
Ellie, follow your feet. It is a morning I'll never forget. The first day it hasn't rained in almost a week. The hour spent walking into Santiago passes in complete silence. Colin and I walk only a few paces apart, yet we're in our own private worlds and not a single word from either of us is spoken. I walk the whole way without lifting my head. Instead, I follow my feet and time the rhythm of every step with the beat of my stick, trying as best I can to remember every detail. The sound, clip click, the sight of cargoes rolled up above swollen feet, the cool breeze across the surface of my skin, and even the pain, savouring the moment in the hope I will never forget. Tears of joy come and go as I recall the last 33 days and feel each of them as if experiencing them for the very first time. Then there, along the roadside, Colin's voice gently calls my attention. There you go, girl. I stop and look up along the corridor of shop fronts and buildings lining the street, and there they are, the spires I have admired in photographs for too long, there in all their glory before my eyes. Colin and I break into a sprint. I hold my breath in expectation as we race towards the cathedral along cobbled laneways underneath a stone footbridge and past a busker playing Amazing Grace on bagpipes. The notes echo off the stonework, and as we slow to a pace, Colin reaches back to take my hand. We round the west wall of the Compostela and enter the historical Praça do Obradoiro. We're here. Heads down, we march with the church behind us to the very centre of the square, then stop, share a smile, and side by side we turn to face our prize. There she is, all 8 centuries of wondrous glory, and at last I'm here. I drop Colin's hand and step forward, resting my chin on top of my stick, breathing in a victory so sweet, a flood of frantic butterflies fills my stomach. Finally free, tears spill down my cheeks. I don't speak, I don't smile, and for a moment I don't move. I just stand weeping before the steps of the Compostela. We made it. Then, without breaking my view, I turn to Col and smile. It's a lovely prize. It is indeed, he laughs. With the final steps taken, we drop, legs folded, and collapse beside each other in the centre of the square. A car alarm sounds from the left. The sun shines from above the right spire of the church. Colin and I sit in the middle of the plaza, unperturbed by the noise or crowds of people passing by. We've earned our place here, and, despite the bustle, we take a moment to appreciate it. Over 1,000 pilgrims are arriving in Santiago each day now. On top of the countless tourists, one of whom steps over me in an attempt to take a snapshot. Yet in the time Colin and I are seated there in the Praça do Obradoiro, I don't spot another pilgrim. Instead, the bulk of admirers wandering the square are day trippers and holiday makers who have driven, trained or bussed in from the surrounding Spanish and European cities. Though I am a foreigner here visiting for the first time, I feel a sense of belonging. Having walked each step from Roncesvalles, Colin and I have become a part of the place, a modest fraction of its revered history, a tiny clump of moss clinging to the Compostela's ancient wall. Tour groups with city guides delivering bilingual commentaries continue to come and go. Several of them stop a few feet and point at us. The tourists stare wide-eyed and gooey-faced, the kind of face you pull when admiring a newborn baby. One of them even takes our picture. Real pilgrims, he declares to the others, while pointing to the viewfinder of his Olympus. Col still has his pack strapped to his back. As the group passes, he reclines against it and folds his arms across his chest in satisfaction. A job well done. I sit with my legs outstretched, toes before the door of the cathedral, my gift granted, my goal achieved, and my partner by my side. Real pilgrims indeed. Colin's smile that day in Santiago is real as well. Genuine. I know it won't last. Santiago to him is a bit like Eurovision, a novelty. He knows he shouldn't laugh, but we both know he will. For now, though, his smile is soft and free of sarcasm. The spark in his eyes has returned, and in recent days, so too has his appetite. He's even managed to kick his addiction to the guidebook, albeit grudgingly. The look on his face comes from somewhere honest and sincere. It's so precious. I take a picture of it as he sits gazing towards the cathedral, then toss him the camera as he, in turn, snaps me where we sit. Then the clouds open up, the sun disappears, and again, as if scripted, A steady rain starts to fall across the square. Time to go? I ask. Looks like it, Carl replies. And I think we've earned a drink, eh, Tonto? What do you say?
Colin, collagen-free cathedral. 1,000 pilgrims a day are descending on Santiago. The ancient walls echo to the sound of drums and bagpipes, for there's a strong simpatica between Ireland and this part of Spain. The roots are deeply entwined, twisted around Catholicism and the pagan goddess cults. Walking in, I see a tiny dumpling figure with blonde hair and headband. Forrest Gumpenberger, walking out, already heading back to Austria. For the next week, she will have to battle the hordes coming the other way. I hope that when she finally reaches her front door in Linz, the door she walked out of 5 months ago, this will finally be enough. We tramp on cobblestones through the ancient and narrow streets of the old town. We get lost 100 yards short of the cathedral. We can see the spire, but we just can't find a way through the maze of old streets. Bagpipes are playing Amazing Grace. Yes, really. And then we walk through a medieval arch, and there it is. The square in front of the cathedral is crowded with scouts and tour groups. A silver Jaguar parked outside the Hotel Rede Católica has its security alarm blaring. Blah, 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 blah. On the cathedral spire, Jimmy the Fish looks displeased. I am so very proud of Ellie. I did not think she could do it. This is a girl who could barely walk 4 kilometres at a time just weeks before this, and she has now walked 800 kilometres in 33 days, just to prove to herself that she could. This was her Everest, and I am proud to stand at the top with her, to admire the view. She has seen me at my worst and still chosen to walk beside me. She has conquered her dark angel and yet continues to set her sights on the next mountain. I love and admire the girl. I wish in a way I felt like I had earned the respect and love she has returned to me. Tour groups block out the sun as we sit on our packs in the square. They stare at the cathedral without getting it at all. A cathedral is just a cathedral. What we are admiring is a journey. I know this cathedral before I step inside it, because I have understood it through the eyes of 1,000 years of pilgrims who have held it in their minds for hundreds of miles of bad food, sore feet and cold sleep. Though the place itself means nothing to me, staring up at it now it seems more significant than I had ever imagined it would be, and evokes both humility and deep satisfaction. Seagulls screech and wheel over the spires of the cathedral, which are grease-green with age. What I really love about this cathedral is that no one has thought to clean it. For all its Gothic grandeur, Leon looks sanitised. Santiago looks every one of its 800 years. There has been no nip and tuck, no boob job, no collagen implants. It's old and it looks it. A sign outside the door urges visitors. Visit the tomb. Hug the apostle. It's like Disney advertising a new ride. Ride the Apostolotron. Inside, the cathedral is a seething mass of the faithful. Flashbulbs pop and pilgrims with video cameras jockey for position. The incense of body odour is intense. So many pilgrims, so few showers. But the bulk of this heaving mass of devotion consists of tourists, bus groups from Bilbao and Madrid and Alicante with toy walking sticks decorated with false gourds and plastic scallop shells, their kids wearing brown felt Santiago hats. Pilgrims touch the central pillar of the Portico de la Gloria, in which St. James is portrayed welcoming the tired pilgrim. Innumerable hands have left deep finger marks on the pillar, like a kid's hand in the icing on a cake. The queue to hug the Romanesque statue of St. James stretches out of the great double doors. There he is at last, Jimmy the Fish, standing up there on the high altar, looking unbearably cheerful, like he has just scored a line of coke. Everyone wants to touch him. Tourists and pilgrims together shuffle up the staircase next to the altar, wanting their brief moment to embrace the cold metal of the gilded bust. Now I have to break this to you gently because I know you'd rather hear it first from a friend. The cathedral is one of the least holy places I've ever been, with the possible exception of the Pussy Ping Pong Club in Phat Pong Road, Bangkok, about 20 years ago. The cuddle huddle for Santiago stretches all the way to the Praza de Immaculada. Santiago maintains a benign grin through it all. Group hug, group hug. It looks to me as spiritual as a kid going up to sit on Father Christmas's lap in the grotto of a department store. There was a tradition once that pilgrims would put their hats on Santiago while they hugged him. Sadly, this has been discontinued. Otherwise, I could have brought my stubby holder hat at the cricket or the baseball cap that says, "I'm with stupid." I turn away, disgusted but amused. In the nave there is a statue of Santiago Matamoros, Moor Slayer, Jimmy the Fish, waving a sword and trampling bleeding Moors under the hoofs of his horse. Call me a sentimentalist, but I prefer him as Santiago, a group hugger. The three-ring circus that is Santiago Cathedral in the summer is not a modern blight, nor is the pushing and shoving. They hadn't even completed this cathedral before there was trouble inside. In 1207, some pilgrims were jostling for the best position in front of the altar, and things got so out of hand that next day the priests had to mop the floors to remove the blood pools, and one section of the cathedral had to be reconstructed. Today, after the pilgrims have seen the reliquary and attended a special pilgrim's mass, they get a framed certificate to hang on the wall of their hovel. Called the Compostela, it is supposed to count as a remission of sins. You get these certificates at the Dean's residence on the Roi de Villars, but the queue snakes halfway around the old city, and it takes some people 3 or 4 hours to get one. I decide that they can stick their Compostela. I don't deserve to have my sins remitted. Besides, even if I do get to heaven, looks like I'll only have to queue up for months to get in. Chapter 36, Day 35, Santiago.
Ellie, with light and love. Next morning I wake at daybreak to view across distant mountains from our first floor window. I get up and dress and slip outside before Colin is awake. Stepping out into the empty streets of Santiago and wandering the laneways towards the church, I can't help but grin a wry smile of content. There will be no lugging a load, binding feet or climbing mountains today. No more yellow arrows to abide by, curfews or early morning alarms. No lining up for a place to stay only to be turned away. No mud to trudge through or cold showers waiting at the end of a very long day's walk. In fact, there will be very little walking done at all today, or tomorrow, and for many days after that. The roof of the cathedral is shrouded in low-level cloud. I shelter from the rain under an archway on the far side of the plaza. The fact that Christians have labelled this a place of spiritual significance means little to me, but I do have a prayer to deliver for many people whom I have carried in my heart and would like to wish good things. The way I see it, anywhere that humbles you to a place of gratitude, whether it be in the waiting room of a hospital or here, at the end of a long journey, makes a prayer worthy of being received. It is something I need to do. As with faith, I will do it in my own private way. Taking a eucalyptus branch, an Australian native collected 3 days ago from the forest, and strapped to the outside of my pack, I tear a page from my notepad filled with the names of those I wish to pray for. I have been keeping a list since boarding the plane in Melbourne. One by one, I carefully write a name on the front of each leaf with a felt-tip pen until the branch is full. Almost 100 names of loved ones, family members and friends. Some I've known all my life, and others I have met recently along the Camino. Mercedes, Simon, Jody, Jonas, Manfred, Forrest, Yoshki and Petra. Francesca, the woman in the wheelchair, and her lover, Robert Benami, and his donkey. And Colin, his daughters and his wife. It takes almost an hour, but when it's complete, I wander across the empty square through light rain to the church, climbing the stone steps of the cathedral to the bolted double doors waiting at the top. I lay my branch beneath the architrave. On one knee, I bless myself and bow my head. Holding my heart, I send a prayer for each of them to the heavens with light and love.
Colin, a day in a not-so-holy city. The next morning at 7:30, the queue for the Compostela already snakes right through the city to, ironically, the Rua da Conga. Scout bands sing songs while they wait. The man I saw get out of his car and run into one of the albergues to get a stamp is right there at the front. It just proves what I always suspected. It is possible to lie and cheat your way into heaven. Inside the cathedral, folk have started hugging Santiago already. He looks resigned to another day of being rubbed, fondled and cuddled. A bit like a sex worker, really. For a man who started life as a keen angler in a remote Palestinian fishing village, he's come a long way. Ellie and I stroll through the streets. There is pilgrim pop everywhere. Kids with toy bagpipes compete with each other to be the most annoying child in Santiago. There are office workers on vacation from Santander and San Sebastian with brown felt Santiago hats and useless pine walking sticks with plastic scallop shells tied on with red string that wouldn't last 5 paces on the meseta. There are marching bands of pilgrims, some with Templar crosses, carrying flags and singing songs. All this religiosity is spooking me. I've only just got here, but already I have to get out of town. At a restaurant we talked to an Australian couple. Born here in northwest Spain, they now live in Balmain in Sydney and are members of the Australian Galician Society. It's frustrating, they say. When people think we're from Spain, They all think it's flamenco dancing in Real Madrid. They don't realise this is just Ireland with olive skin. Ellie's bare feet in her Birkenstocks are a mess of bandages. She looks like a leper in a Monty Python film. A schoolboy stops her in the street and asks if he can take a photo of her feet for a school project he's doing on pilgrims. She poses for him and he is pathetically grateful. Ellie has been serene since we reached here. She has proved something to herself. I guess she has proved something to a lot of people. I wonder now, if I had been on that hospital gurney as she was 6 years ago, would I have had the strength or desire to get up? Where is the line between character building and soul destroying? At this moment, the separation between these two states seems membrane thin. I mistrust anyone who thinks they know. Perhaps we need to travel great lengths to find out what that difference is. At least 800 kilometres. Chapter 37, Day 36, Finisterre. Colin, to the ends of the earth. I always wondered where Finisterre was. I remember hearing the name on the BBC weather forecasts when I was a kid. There was always the chance of a force 9 gale, apparently. Finisterre is actually a cape on the northwest coast of Spain, 80 kilometres from Santiago. It's the westernmost point on the Costa da Morte, the coast of death, and in Roman times it was the last redoubt of the known world. The ancients believed it was where the world of men met the world of the gods, and the tradition of homage to this place was hijacked by the Spanish church when Jimmy the Fish's remains were conveniently discovered in a hillside tomb just short of the coast. Finisterre itself is a taddy, moth-eaten fishing village, but its crappiness holds incredible charm for me. Fishermen sit in their garages under their flats mending nets. Waitresses serve café con leche with their thumbs in the cup. Washing hangs from the balconies of waterside flats. Old men sit around outside and drink espresso and play cards and wonder if it's their month to shave. It's a blessed relief after Santiago. No chanting scout groups, no Tour de Santiago cyclists in bright yellow lycra, clutching pilgrim passports in one hand and their bulging gonads in the other. No Sunday strollers with plastic Peregrino walking sticks. Mist creeps around the headland that fingers into the sea. Gulls cry like babies. Red and blue and green fishing boats jog on the spot in the harbour. Peugeots drive too fast through the narrow streets. A man in a wheelchair eats his lunch in the middle of the roundabout. And there are seafood restaurants everywhere. Spaniards will eat anything but plankton and waves. The blackboard menus advertise lobster, shrimp, clams, prawns, monkfish, deep-fried lighthouse and flotsam in shellfish sauce. There is a legend that the Virgin Mary came here once in a stone boat to encourage James in his preaching. Encourage him how, I wonder? Maybe with a hug. He likes those. Or did she just give him a good slapping? 5 converts in 9 years? Ace it up, stupid. I want to see results so you can go back to catching herring. I walk the short distance out to the Cape. It nestles on the peninsula like a child hiding in its mother's skirts. There is a statue of a boot over a small stone fire pit where modern pilgrims burn their shoes to mark the end of a pilgrimage. Of course, in Roman times they could not do this. They had to turn around and walk home in theirs. I climb down the cliffs to the edge of the world for my own private ceremony. A veil of rain sweeps in from the heavens and sets me shivering, cooling the sweat on my back. I've written some words on a piece of paper and I put it in an empty wine bottle and send it to the gods with a private prayer. The ceremony is quickly done and I don't linger. This time the prayer is for me. Why is it harder to send a prayer for myself than someone else? It might seem noble, but now I've worked out the answer and I can assure you that it's not. I can understand how the ancients concluded that this was the end of the world. It does feel like the gods or goddesses are just out there, where the pearl grey horizon meets the sea. I hope when my bottle gets there and they read what's inside, they don't just laugh and decide to play more practical jokes. God's great banana skin is not even funny the first time. A second time will be pushing the friendship. Here's the thing, if you're ever in Muxia, immediately go somewhere else. I walked that morning from Finisterre on pine-needle paths through conifer forests and rat-bag hamlets with dry stone walls overgrown with brambles. It's a rotting eternal world of donkeys, compost heaps, stone ruins, corn, cats, barking dogs, cow shit, rusting ladders and washing machines falling to bits in the ruins of crumbling stone houses. I walk with a couple of smiling Spanish boys. Unfortunately, they don't have much English and I don't have much Spanish. Do you have visas for your country? One of them asks me as we walk along. Visas? No. Oh, very good. We had to have them 5 years ago, but not anymore. He looks puzzled. You have visas for 5 years, but you don't have now? It doesn't matter to me, I have dual nationality. He looks truly worried. What your visa look like? Well, like a stamp, it goes in your passport. Here the visa yellow and black. One just bite me on the ear, I think. Ah, that sort of visa. We stare at each other in mutual dismay and abandon any further attempts at conversation. Out here on the road to Muxia, it's like being back in the early days of the Camino. There are no tramping whores because there is no cathedral and no remission of sins. Here people come on private pilgrimage. They know they will still have their sins when they leave. They just hope not to commit so many of them from now on. I've come to Muxia for a purpose. I have with me a photograph and a prayer that have accompanied me the whole way from Sydney, and I intend now to deliver them. It's the same prayer to the Madonna that I have repeated at every church, every shrine that was open to receive me. The church of Maria de la Barca stands on the cliffs at the tip of the peninsula. Its doors are so close to the waves you can feel the salt spray on your face as you look through the grill at the Queen of Heaven. But the first time it occurs to me that the prayer is not just another intricate manipulation. I'm trying to manipulate God into giving me what I want, and manipulate the creator of the prayer into thinking I am the one who can answer hers. There are no victims here, just authors of their own disasters. I go to the back of the cathedral and, without prayer or ceremony, leave the photograph and petition behind, secreted in the church. For all I know, they're still there. I sit on the rocks and stare at the sea. From my backpack I brought with me from home, even though I don't smoke. It's engraved, to my lover and best friend. Sometimes it seems there is not room enough in the world for all our regrets, and yet when even the smallest lesson is learned or glimpsed, what can you do but regret that you had not learned it sooner and wonder at how things might have been different if you had? I had thought to toss the cigar case into the sea. The inscription rang hollow to me now, but I didn't. I returned it to my pack as a reminder of a more innocent time. I could blame a lot of people for the mess in my life. In the last 36 days I probably have, as we have walked in silent contemplation of the past. But I will be honest with you. I now suspect that the person responsible is sitting right here, right now, on these rocks below the Maria de la Barca. I was the one who wanted to be everyone's saviour, so why complain when someone thanks me for saving them and then moves on? Who denied anyone a free choice? Who insisted they see it his way, and that was the only way there was to look at things? Is this how I've killed love in my life? Do I destroy love by closing my fist around it and trying to grasp it? And yet I could have avoided all this. I could have stayed with the devil I knew. It was safe there. I would never have had to face all this. Could have told myself that I was a good man by never stepping outside the walls of the castle I had built. Looking good, going nowhere. Ellie has done something no woman has yet done. She called my bluff without scooping up the pot and walking away from the table. By my observation, she needed neither physical nor emotional support to walk to Santiago, and I suspect she knew this all along. But she still apparently saw something in me that I did not. This is not Hollywood. I don't have a trite denouement where a last-minute miracle shows me the way. Out there, beyond the horizon, the gods have taken my bottle from the ocean and are studying my prayer, and Ellie's, and perhaps yours also. And in a day or a year, I will have back their answer. I have walked my pilgrimage, and I cannot dictate if the gods beyond the sea will listen or laugh at my feeble attempts to control my own destiny. But out here I have felt, if only for a time, small and humble, and have heard in ancient stones the prayers of pilgrims long since dead. I have felt, if for a moment, a part of eternity and a greater plan at the end of the earth. All I can do when I walk away from here is shrug on my smile, like Ellie's pack, doof, and take each day back, each step at a time.
Ellie, and beyond. We arrive in Finisterre in the early evening as daylight fades beyond the horizon. Though views of the surrounding township are filtered through the thick haze of an ocean spray, I can't shake a persistent sense that I have been here before. In appearance, it's unique, like nowhere I've seen. I've never bought a print of it or received a postcard from Finisterre, yet everything about this charming fishing village is somehow familiar. The coloured masts of the tiny sailboats painting a picture on the harbour, the labyrinth of narrow winding streets, the ruined castle turrets dripping into the ocean below, and the concrete pier. Déjà vu in each direction. Either I have been here before, or I have lived the feeling this place inspires. The following morning I wake to find Colin has already left. It is just after 7 and he has gone to spend the day and night in Muxia. It's something that he needs to do. With the day to myself, I visit the local supermarket around 10 before returning to the albergue, where I lay a picnic out across the table in the communal dining room. As I take notes and snack on a spread of Spanish tapas, a Swedish traveller who's recently set up home here in Finisterre joins me at the table. He tells me he finished the Camino 7 months ago and realised in the process that his life at home had lost relevance, so he stayed. I go home to an office job in a call centre with a boss who gets paid to stand over my shoulder and make me feel like mud. He doesn't even know my name. But still, I must answer to him, and he must answer to the company, and the company must answer to the government who I pay tax to. It is all around and about in circles going nowhere, he says. I tell him I understand. Life here is a far cry from the rat race of cities everywhere. Bills, mobile phones, Sex and City, 9 to 5, working days, and the general dog-eat-dog mentality of everyday life are rendered inconsequential when each day is stripped to its essentials. Priorities change. What I appreciate most about Camino life, however, is time. Time to think, to breathe, to talk, to ponder, to explore, to learn, to interact and grow, to enjoy food and wine and moments and views. Time to give thanks for what you have, identify what you don't have, and work on things that you need. Time. As much of it as you like. I'm going to miss it, and I know, in time, I will miss the person I am with it. After lunch, I begin the trek alone out to Cape Finisterre, the final destination on my itinerary. There I'll sit at what was once believed to be the end of the earth on the western edge of the European continent, and look out into the vast ocean knowing that there is not a single step left to take. The prospect of a 7-kilometre hike now is like a wander down the driveway to collect the mail. I never thought I'd see the day. It's a short yet significant little trip, and the last I plan to make on foot for quite a while. Walking out of the township along the roadside, I peel off the sealed path, deciding to take a secondary trail up the cliff face and along the ridge. I have no map or arrows to guide the way, and I'm not sure where it leads, but I have 4 hours of daylight to find out. The path zigzags all the way to the top, and at the crest of the hill, the land pans across a windswept plain dotted with mushroom caps of boulders. The ocean lies like a lake in the distance. I look ahead to try to spot the lighthouse, but can't see through my tears. I'm surprised. I've cried a lot since Santiago. It seems for every step I've walked, a tear has been stored, waiting to be released. I'm not sure what they all mean, but it feels right, so I let them go. As I wander across the sparse terrain towards the water, I think about Colin walking out here earlier this morning, stumbling through the dark of dawn, doing what he needs to do to bring his journey to an end. I can't tell you what an experience it has been to watch him fall and rise beside me, both fascinating and heartbreaking. I once heard him say, to be a better man, there has to be some sort of spiritual connection made. Before we came to Spain, he admitted he had none, but the fact that he has left today to send a message to the gods or goddesses across the sea tells me that, if nothing else, he has at least found that much here. I guess it's only when we're open to receiving answers that we stand any chance of finding them. And it's typically at our weakest or most vulnerable that we seek them. Perhaps this is what pilgrimage is about. To cast aside your possessions, discard your ego, and to push yourself beyond your limits. Essentially, to surrender your wants and trust that what you do find will be exactly what you need. My wish for Cole today is not that his prayer will be received, but that he will find peace for having sent it. I arrive at a knoll overlooking the lighthouse, which itself hangs on a cliff edge, overlooking the vast Atlantic. Clambering onto a rock, I perch myself in line with the horizon. There I take a moment to write a note that I hope to go back and read if and when I ever doubt myself again. Having come this far, I've decided self-doubt is nothing more than a bad habit I can break. The Camino has been the first step in that process, a kind of cleansing, a spiritual detox. I have my evidence now. Nearing the lighthouse, I notice that, like the cathedral in Santiago, there are many more tourists than there are pilgrims. I ignore the attention as I pass, edging my way beyond the barriers to the steep cliff face. Descending closer toward the spray of breaking waves, I use my stick to tread carefully down the jagged rocks, reminding myself of the irony of a slip of death at a time like this. Though he'd never admit it, I'm sure Cole would manage a great laugh at my expense. Arriving at the furthest point, I take my place on the flat surface of an overhang, feet dangling directly above the notorious waters, the coast of death. My stomach sinks with the flutters of fear, and for a pleasant change, I can't feel my feet. I have arrived at the end of the earth, the western tip, a place recognised throughout the ages for its spiritual significance and ethereal energy, and the last place where the sun sets over European shores each day to be reborn the next. It's here that the journey Colin and I have taken together is finally complete. I spend close to an hour gazing out across the ocean, giving thanks and wondering what might lie now ahead. Standing, I secure my footing in the mud and pitch the stick that has helped carry me here into a crash of waves below, and prepare to walk back to Finisterre unaided to begin the journey home. Looking back a final time over my right shoulder, I marvel at the courage of the sailor brave enough to set out across uncharted waters in the hope of proving that there was, in fact, something out there, beyond the sea, worth finding and fighting for. Pegging his hope and belief against a world full of sceptics, he pursued his dream regardless, and in 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered land and indeed changed the world. Who said it can't be done? In doing so, he also proved that what we think we know is not always what is real, that we are only bound by our own imagination, and that sometimes what may appear to be the end is, in actual fact, the beginning of something even better.